Hey guys, so I'm a fan of math and a fan of games, but most math games out there aren't known for being very fun. Nim, more like dim-witted. Tic-tac-toe, more like tic-tac-go, away cause it's so bland. Sudoku, more like Su broke you down cause you got so bored.
It's time to stop.
See, the issue here is that there's no thrill, no creeping danger that keeps you or the audience on the edge of your seat. If you write the wrong number in Sudoku, you're just like, oh, that's annoying, whatever. So now I introduce to you a brand new math game that puts your life on the line. Disclaimer, don't actually play this game unless you know your limits, because I don't want anyone dying because of my video. Awkward. Seriously, this is all a joke. Anyway, here's the rules, again as a joke. There's a timer on the floor counting up once per second, like 1, 2, 3, and so on. Multiple mathematicians dunk their heads into transparent tubs of water so they can see the timer ticking up. You can only lift your head up to breathe if the number on the clock is a prime number. Let's see this in action. So 2 and 3 are prime numbers, so our contestants are allowed to breathe. 4 is not though, but 5 is. This pattern continues, meaning contestants can breathe at the 7, 11, and 13 second marks, and so on. A strong lung capacity and quick maths are both essential skills to doing well at this game. If the police catch you with your head out of water during a composite number like 004, or if you pass out, this buzzer will go off, meaning you're eliminated from the game. The last mathematician standing wins a grand prize of $2 because it's the first prime number. I'm calling this game Breathe If Prime, and it's a lot of fun, but again, don't play this game unless you know your lung capacity well. But with that out of the way, let's explore why this game is so interesting. Since 1798, we've known that the density of primes goes down the higher you count, thanks to work by this legendary joker. For example, between 0 and 100, there's 25 primes, but between 100 and 200, there's only 21. And by 200 to 300, there's only 16. And this pattern continues forever. This makes intuitive sense because the higher you go, the more factors there are underneath yourself to be divided by, so it's harder and harder to dodge all the factors and stay prime. This phenomenon is described with the prime counting function, denoted as pi of x. And in the 1790s, Carl Gauss and the aforementioned legendary joker gave a guess that pi of x was around x over log x. For something as unpredictable as primes, like literally they're so unpredictable we use them to encrypt basically all communication on the internet, it's kind of crazy how accurate this simple estimate is. It overpredicts the actual number of primes by no more than 14%, and at large values of x, we're talking quintillions and up, it stabilizes at less than 1.6% error. That's 1 part per 60. So pi of x is interesting, but how does that relate to my game? Well, it means at the early stages of this game, like the first 60 seconds, you get quite a few opportunities to breathe. In fact, because of 2 and 3, you get 2 seconds in a row to breathe at the very start.
Spoiled brat.
Which never happens again because 2 is the only even prime. In addition, there are frequent moments when you get to breathe, like at 11 seconds, then you have to do the most minimal of head bobs at 12 seconds, and then you get to come up for breath again at 13 seconds. These 3-second periods of nearly uninterrupted breathing, known as TISPO nubs by BIP athletes and twin primes by mathematicians, can really help you out if your lungs are screaming, but they become less frequent as the game wears on. There are 6 sets of twin primes in the first minute, but only 3 by the second minute, and only 2 by the third minute. The 7th minute of the game, which is like the 7th inning stretch invented by President William Howard Taft, is brutal. It's the first time there are no TISPO nubs in an entire minute. Here's a question. Do TISPO nubs continue to exist infinitely throughout this game? Let's think. Do they? Do they? Hint, hint, hint. So as you can see, Breathe If Prime already satisfies the game design principle that difficulty should match players' ability. Sure, bigger lunged players do better, but eventually, the difficulty curve will catch up with them. And this difficulty curve happens for another reason too. See, you have to calculate in your head whether a number is prime or not. No relying on ChatGPTs or old-fashioned ChatGPTs, known as calculators, for assistance. It's all on you. So I would say for most 2-digit numbers, you can just look at it and get a vibe for its primeness. But it tickles me pink that people online all somehow seem to agree that certain non-prime numbers just feel so obviously prime-coded.
The fact that 51 is not a prime number because it's 17 times 3, I'm gonna be sick.
Like for me, the worst one is 91. 91 isn't prime? What the fuck? Oh right, difference of squares. Anyway, casual math fans will notice this game start to get harder around the 3rd minute. Quick, is 127 prime? In the first minute, you could just take each prime as it comes, but in the mid game, you need to start thinking ahead. All numbers ending in even digits or 5s are composite, so don't waste any brain power on them. That means as soon as the clock hits 123, which isn't prime, your brain should immediately start thinking if 127 is prime. Spoiler, it is. That gives you anywhere from 2 to 4 seconds to do your math, and if you use even more advanced tricks, you can get even 6 or 8 seconds to do your math. This is called think ahead, and professional bit players will spend years training their think ahead. Here's another fun question. What's the longest a typical person could survive? Assuming they can hold their breath for about a minute. I feel like that's about average. Well, let's just let a game play out and watch these 3 players, and if they reach a segment of time where there's 60 seconds of no primes, then they'll die. In the lower right, you'll see that I'm recording statistics on prime concentration, the average gap between primes, and the record gap seen so far. In the early 100s, we get an oasis of twin primes, sorely needed because it's preceded by the dry 80s and 90s, and followed by the dry 110s and 120s. In fact, the gap between 113 and 127 is the first time our contestants will have to hold their breath for a double-digit number of seconds, pushing the record gap from 8 to 14. Surprisingly though, that record will hold for the next 5 minutes of gameplay, so if you can make it past this, you're set for a while. Next, let's jump ahead to the aforementioned 7th minute, the first one to have no twin primes. It sounds grueling, but it's actually not that bad. Average gap size has only increased from 5 to 6, and there's no double-digit breath holds in this minute, even though competitors have already gotten used to them, there having been 6 so far. The coveted 10-minute mark is ushered in through the gates of a twin prime, 599 and 601. The record gap size has expanded to 18 seconds. At this point though, audience members are starting to get bored. Fortunately for them though, the exciting and historic first 20-second hold literally surrounds the 15-minute mark, going from 887 to 907. We're just starting to get to lengths of breath holds where amateurs can't make it from the start to the finish. And somewhere along the way, we see a 22-seconder, and our competitors smash through that because it's only a 10% increase. But things are about to get much harder though, because the next record after 22 seconds isn't 24, it's not 26, and it's not even 28. No, rather, this excruciating game is forcing our competitors to hold their breath for 34 seconds. Professional bit players have agreed on this rule that if you dip out at this 34-second hold, you're intermediate, but if you make it through, you're an expert. This is known as BIP's Rule 34, and remember, it's only 22 minutes in. Fast forwarding now, the average gap size fluctuates between 7 and 10. At the pivotal half-hour mark, contestants have now dunked their heads a total of 278 times, for an average of 1 breath every 6.5 seconds. You might be slightly concerned because that's below the healthy adult average of once every 4 seconds, but honestly, you should be more concerned with the irregularity of breaths than the raw frequency. We've hit the 1 hour mark, nearly the length of a short movie, and we still haven't seen any gaps longer than 34. Alright, here's a thought you might have. You might be thinking, okay, I could survive a 30-second hold, but my lungs don't do a full reset just because I breathed once. If I have to do a 20-second hold over and over and over again, I'll feel more and more out of air with each repetition, and eventually I'll have to quit. That is true, and it's a concept I explored for a bit, with the idea of lungs being more like a fuel tank that gradually refills. I wrote a part of the script that covers that, but it doubled the video length, so I cut it out. Anyway, yes, we are shockingly at the 3-hour mark, and the largest gap we've seen has barely budged, still just at 36. And that's still true even at the 4-hour mark? What? Perhaps it's just some rule of math that primes have to occur at some base level of frequency such that no gaps longer than 36 can exist? Maybe that's true, but 36 feels really random and it would be hard to prove. Instead, we could just keep running the simulation until we hope to find a larger gap if one does exist, but it's getting kind of tiring just waiting so long. Luckily, PrimeGapListProject.github tracks the record largest prime gaps as you count up. The first time there's a gap larger than 60 is from 31,397 to 31,469. Nice. A full 72 seconds that the average player just won't be able to endure. This is known in the BIP community as the minute lung killer. Okay, I just want to point out that a mere 4 seconds before your send-off, the game gifts you with a rare twin prime to fill up on extra oxygen. It might not be enough to keep you alive, but it's a nice gesture nonetheless. How long is 31,000 seconds? 8.5 hours. Yes, you're playing this game all night, and yes, you will enjoy it. That's 3,385 head dunks, by the way, roughly 1 every 9 seconds. But that's just us amateurs. Let's take it to the next level. How long could the most highly trained, max lung capacity expert survive at this game? Pause. I guess I'll have to reveal the answer to that in part 2 of this video, or you can try to figure it out yourself. Anyway, I'm in New York right now, but I have a quick announcement before I go. Do you know OpenSauce, which is like a convention for nerdy content creators, happening July 18th to 20th in San Francisco? Well, I have the huge honor of getting to be one of the featured creators of OpenSauce this year. You can see if you scroll down, I'm right here next to Aaron Hansen and Code Bullet. So if you want to meet me and talk about STEM-related things like computer science, or math, or biology, then buy a ticket to OpenSauce right now and we can meet up and discuss really fun things like that. Thank you for watching and I'll see you later. Bye! Hey guys, it's me, Carrie, and... Okay, I don't know why I did that, but anyway, have you viewers heard about this thing called non-transitive dice? One of my favorite mathematicians, Tadashi Tokieda, talked about them on Numberphile's channel a few years ago, and these dice things are the biggest mindfunk ever. Why? Well, suppose yellow Carrie rolls a normal 6-sided die, with the sides having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 on them.
And pink Carrie rolls an altered 6-sided die, with each side having a 2 on it.
Who's more likely to get the higher score?
Obviously yellow Carrie, because that mother***er rigged this game against me.
Mathematically speaking, okay, yellow Carrie will win 4 out of 6 times, right? Because there's a 4 out of 6 chance yellow Carrie rolls a 3 or higher. So, since the yellow die scores higher than the pink die over 50% of the time, we'll say that yellow beats pink. Okay, that was the tutorial. Now imagine these 4 dice.
The green die sides have 0, 0, and 4, 4, 4, 4. The blue die sides have 1, 1, 1, and 5, 5, 5. The purple die sides have 2, 2, 2, 2, and 6, 6. And the red die has 3 on all of its sides. Not everybody can be so interesting. I like to think of the red die as like these characters, basically the simple-minded brute of the pack.
But anyway, now it's time to ask, which dice beat which other dice? Well, let's start by looking at green versus blue. The blue die has a 50% chance of rolling a 5, which beats all of green's options. So for that 50%, blue is guaranteed the victory. But even if blue blunders and rolls a 1, there's still a 2 in 6 chance that green blunders even harder and rolls a 0. So even for that losing 50%, blue has a slight edge, which boosts blue's chance of victory to 2 in 3. So that means that blue beats green. But what about blue versus purple? Well, this is sort of symmetrical, but in the other direction. So the blue die has a 50% chance of rolling a 1, which is lower than all of purple's options. So that means for that 50%, blue is guaranteed the loss. But even if blue succeeds and rolls a 5, well, there's still a 2 out of 6 chance that purple succeeds even higher and rolls a 6, giving purple the slight edge to win 2 out of 3 times. And that means that purple beats blue. Next, let's take a look at purple versus red. This one is an easy one because red always rolls a 3. So to beat that, purple just needs to roll higher than a 3, which unfortunately only happens 2 out of 6 times. And that means that red beats purple. And finally, let's complete the cycle by comparing red to green. Again, red always rolls a 3, so green just needs to beat that to win, which green will do 4 out of 6 times. And that means that green beats red. Did you notice something unusual about all this? It's like a 4-way cycle. What? What's going on? Normally, when we think of a skill, let's say boxing, then if person A beats person B, and person B beats person C, then it's obvious that person A is just the strongest of them all, and will also beat person C. Like if you just measure everyone's skill on a numerical scale, person A just solos everyone. But that's only true for a transitive property. And like I said at the beginning, these dice are not transitive. You can't just give them numerical scores and rank them. In fact, if you did score them by their average result, aka expected value, they all in essence have the same expected value of 3. So that's not going to help us understand what's going on here. What is going to help? Well, let's start by visualizing a two-way match as a 6x6 grid. The green die's 6 outcomes are on the x-axis, and the blue die's 6 outcomes are on the y-axis. Then, each of these 36 cells represents an equally likely outcome of the match, and we can label them either green or blue depending on who wins. For example, suppose green rolls a 4, then we'd go over horizontally to here, and suppose blue rolls a 5, then we'd go up vertically to here, and sure enough, that cell is colored blue because blue's 5 beats green's 4. As expected, more than 50% of this graph is colored blue, which means that blue beats green. We can do something similar for the other matchups, blue versus purple, purple versus red, and red versus green. And now we can just see visually that purple covers more area than blue, red covers more area than purple, and green covers more area than red. But hold on. This is an even number of matchups, which means we can try something interesting. What if we transpose every other graph like this? Now, the green die's result shows up as the x-axis on both graphs featuring green, and so does purple. And on the other hand, the blue die's result shows up as the y-axis on both graphs featuring blue, and so does red. Why is this useful? Well, now we can sort of superimpose all 4 graphs on top of each other. This is gonna get messy, so we'll have to bring in the third dimension. Instead of representing the winning die by just coloring that cell that color, why not represent it with the z-axis, the physical height of the cell? So let's say green scores a 4 and blue scores a 5, you would see a green layer at height level 4 and a blue layer at height level 5. So then blue wins because their layer is higher and closer to the camera. Pretty cool, don't you think? Anyway, I used processing 3 to mock up this shape in 3 dimensions, and you can see on the left there's the 2D version and on the right it's the 3D version. So from the top they look about the same, but if I turn the camera down to the side you can see all the more complex structure. So since the x-axis determines the green die's outcome, you can see that from left to right the green die changes its height, and for the blue die it's the y-axis, which is why on the lower end it's 1s and on the higher end it's 5s. So from above we can see that blue indeed wins 24 out of 36 times, which is 2/3, and that's why it wins the match. But if we look from the side, we can see that a lot of the times that blue wins, they're only winning by about 1. See, blue's 1 over green's 0, or blue's 5 over green's 4. Whereas in the 1/3 chance that green wins with these 4s, green is winning by a huge margin of 3 over blue's 1s, and that's kind of like wasted potential. Because in order to win the match, you don't need to win by a lot, you just need to win by the tiniest margin. It's kind of like the Electoral College in the US, which I think has some problems, but I don't really want to get into that subject. So let's move on. I made it so that I could press the arrow keys to move on to the next set of dice. So here's blue versus purple. It's sort of like a symmetrical inversion of the previous one. And from above, you can see that purple wins 2 out of 3 times. And just like before, when purple, the victor wins, a lot of times it's only by a difference of 1. It's 2 versus 1, or it's 6 versus 5. But then when blue wins, it's often by a huge margin, 5 versus 2. So that is why purple beats blue and blue beats green. Next, let's bring in the red die, which is just a flat plane because red always rolls a 3. That makes this comparison kind of boring because it's so obvious that purple is just going to be on top 1/3 of the time whenever purple rolls a 6. But you can see that again, when red wins, it's always by a tiny margin, but when purple wins, it's by this huge margin that's like wasted potential. It's kind of a repetitive story at this point. So let's bring in the last comparison, which is red versus green. So looking from above, green does cover 24 out of 36 of the territory, but if we look from the side, we can see the symmetry between red versus green and red versus purple. They're actually rotationally symmetrical versions of each other. They look like lowercase f's, which is pretty cool. But yeah, same deal about losing by a lot or winning by a tiny amount. I don't want to repeat myself, but anyway, it's time to move on to the grand reveal of everyone all at once. And this was sort of the whole reason I wanted to build this in processing, was that I wanted a single structure, like a single shape, that I could visualize all at once to understand what the whole problem was. I feel like this idea of the non-transitive dice has been mentioned in so many mathematician articles and videos, but none of them really gave me a sense of what the numbers were doing. But this has helped me sort of figure it out. So there's kind of simultaneous things going on right now. As I mentioned before, both the green die and the purple die's outcomes are being measured on the x-axis, which is why if we look at just green and purple, the only change is